In a climate-controlled case in a Cairo museum sits a box of bones with no face. A skeleton, brown, fragile, picked apart by bad handling a century ago. It has a catalog number, CG61075, and almost nothing else. No name. The coffin it came in had its golden face ripped off. The places where a name should have been carved were scratched out, hacked away, erased by human hands more than 3,000 years ago. Someone wanted this man forgotten. Someone wanted him to not exist. Most people walk right past the case. They are there for the gold mask of his son a few rooms over. But hidden inside that box of bones is something that should not be there. Because for over 100 years, every team that has examined this skeleton has reached the same uncomfortable conclusion. The bones do not match the man they are supposed to belong to. The skull is the wrong shape. The age is wrong. The body does not fit any clean diagnosis modern medicine can offer. And the king, it was buried, as was depicted, in his own lifetime, looking like nothing else that has ever sat on a human throne. This is the story of the Pharaoh, whose remains match no known human, the man Egypt tried to delete, and the strange things that were buried in the tomb with him. If unexplained history like this gets under your skin the way it gets under mine, subscribe and turn on the bell, because what they found in that tomb only gets harder to explain. Let me take you back to the morning it was opened. January 1907, the Valley of the Kings. An archaeologist named Edward Aten, digging on behalf of a wealthy American lawyer named Theodore Davis, broke into a small, rough, unmarked tomb. It was given the dull label it still carries today, KV55. And from the moment the dust settled, it became one of the strangest crime scenes in the history of archaeology. Inside was a single coffin, a gilded wooden shrine, its panels inscribed for Queen Tia, the great matriarch of the dynasty. 4 canopic jars, the alabaster vessels Egyptians used to hold a body's organs, carved with the delicate face of a royal woman. Magic bricks, seal impressions, a silver goose head, pieces of furniture. It looked, at first, like the burial of a queen. Then, the anatomist Grafton Elliott Smith examined the bones in Cairo, and the queen turned out to be a young man. Here is the first strange thing, and it is the thread that unravels everything. Almost every object in that tomb was made for someone else. The shrine was Queen Tia's. The canopic jars were carved for a woman, almost certainly Kia, one of the king's secondary wives, and then crudely altered, a royal cobra added to each lid, her name scraped off. The coffin itself was originally built for a woman, then converted for a king, with an added false beard, a cobra at the brow, and the crook and flail of a pharaoh. Nothing in the tomb was originally his. He was buried in a dead woman's coffin, surrounded by other people's funeral equipment, his own name destroyed. For decades, scholars treated this as a simple mess, a rushed reburial, items grabbed in a hurry and dumped together. And that explanation is not wrong, but it is incomplete because it skips the obvious question. Who erases a king so completely, then hides what is left in a borrowed box in the most sacred valley in Egypt? You do not do that to a man you have forgotten. You do that to a man you are afraid of. So, who was he? The tomb gave 4 clues, and each one starts out looking like a footnote until you turn it over. Here is the first clue. The magic bricks. 4 clay bricks were found inside KV55. To most visitors, they would look like nothing, lumps of mud. But Egyptians placed these as protective objects, one at each compass point around a royal burial, inscribed with the king's name to guard his soul. 2 of the bricks in this tomb were too damaged to read, but the other 2 were clear. They named a single individual, the throne name of Akhenaten. Akhenaten, the heretic king, the pharaoh who, around 14 centuries before Christ, did something no Egyptian ruler had ever dared. He abolished the gods, all of them, He erased the old priesthoods, shut their temples, and ordered Egypt to worship one single faceless force, the Aten, the disk of the sun. He moved the entire capital to virgin desert. And when he died, the priests he had stripped of power took their revenge. They tore down his city, chiseled his name off every wall, and tried to wipe him out of time itself. The bricks said this was him. Mainstream Egyptology, for the most part, agrees. So the case looks closed, except the body in the coffin refused to confirm it. That is the first clue. The second clue is the body itself, and this is where it stops being a history lesson. Look at how Akhenaten chose to be shown. For 3,000 years, pharaohs were carved one way: broad shoulders, narrow waist, strong, triangular, godlike, heroic. It was propaganda in stone, and every king followed it. Then, Akhenaten threw it out. He ordered artists to show him as something else entirely: an elongated skull stretched far back, a long thin neck, a narrow chest over a swollen, almost pregnant belly, wide hips, spindly limbs, long fingers, heavy thighs tapering to thin calves, almond, alien eyes. The effect was so disturbing that the first European Egyptologists who saw these images could not even agree whether they were looking at a man or a woman. For over a century, the debate has run in circles. Was this real, or was it art? Medical experts have thrown diagnosis after diagnosis at him. A Yale professor argued for two genetic disorders at once: craniosynostosis, where the skull bones fuse too early and force the head into an elongated shape, combined with aromatase excess syndrome, which would explain the feminine body. Others have proposed Marfan syndrome to account for the long limbs. And here is the unsettling part. The strangeness was not his alone. His wife Nefertiti is shown with the same stretched skull. His daughters are carved with elongated heads and depicted with adult breasts at the ages of 3 and 7. Even his relatives, including the boy King Tutankhamun and the earlier ruler Hatshepsut, show cranial abnormalities that echo the same pattern. Whatever it was, it ran in the blood. It was inherited. But that explanation has a problem. The body in KV55 does not show it. That is the second clue. The third is the paradox that has kept this tomb unsolved for 100 years. When scientists finally examined the KV55 skeleton in detail, the deformities were not there. No fused skull plates of severe craniosynostosis. No clear skeletal signature of Marfan syndrome. The bones did not carry the extreme shape that Akhenaten put on every wall of his kingdom. So either the art was a lie, pure symbolism, a king pretending to be strange, or the art was true, and these are not his bones. And then came the age. In February 2010, a landmark DNA study electrified the world. It tested the royal mummies, traced the family tree, and concluded that the man in KV55 was the son of the pharaoh Amenhotep III and the father of Tutankhamun. By bloodline, that is, Akhenaten. The case looked sealed at last, but almost immediately, other researchers attacked the result. The problem was the bones said the man died young, possibly in his early 20s, while Akhenaten is known to have ruled for 17 years and should have died older. The genetics pointed one way. The skeleton pointed another. The father of the most famous boy in history, and we still cannot agree on how old he was when he died, or whether the body is even the right one. A king whose own bones argue with his own DNA. That is not a footnote. That is a mystery science has not closed. So they did what people do with anomalies. They reached for the most extreme answer. Because there is a fourth clue, and it lives at the edge of respectable science. In the fringe corners of this story, researchers point to that elongated skull and ask a question the museums will not. What if it is not a disease at all? Reports have circulated for years of a DNA sample supposedly taken from Akhenaten's tissue that returned an anomaly in a gene controlling the growth of the brain's cortex, a result claim to differ from every other mummy tested. They point out that across the ancient world, from the Andes to Central Asia, elongated skulls keep appearing in royal and priestly lines, people who called themselves gods among men. They note that the rulers of the Aten Huns, more than 1,000 years later and half a continent away, bound their skulls into the very same shape and claimed the very same divinity. And they ask whether Akhenaten was not hiding a deformity, but advertising a bloodline. A lineage he believed came from something that was not entirely human. It was sealed, it was erased, and the one man who might explain it has no face and no name. Now, does any of this prove the most extreme version that a pharaoh of Egypt carried the genes of gods or visitors from somewhere else? Almost certainly not. Let me give the grounded explanation its due, because it is strong, and the mystery survives it anyway. The simplest answer to the skull is that there was no skull deformity. The art of Akhenaten's reign, the Amarna style, may have been pure theology. He declared himself the mother and father of all mankind, the living link to a creator who was both and neither. Showing himself as androgynous, swollen with life, neither male nor female, may have been a deliberate religious statement carved into stone, not a portrait of a real body. That would explain why the bones look ordinary. The strangeness was a message, not a medical condition. The elongated skulls in other cultures are well documented as artificial cranial deformation. Heads bound in infancy because a society found the shape beautiful or holy. No aliens required. And the DNA anomaly claims have never appeared in a verified, peer-reviewed study. The famous 2010 results point to a normal, if deeply inbred royal family, a dynasty that married brother to sister for generations, which alone can produce a long catalog of physical defects. But here is what the grounded version cannot erase. Strip away every wild theory, and you are still left with a man Egypt tried to delete from existence. A coffin with its face torn off. A name hacked out by people who had every reason to fear it. A skeleton whose age and shape have started a fight that has lasted 120 years and is not over. A royal family so physically unusual that their own kingdom could not decide if their king was a man or a woman. The plainest, true version is already extraordinary. We have the father of the most famous pharaoh on earth, and we cannot say for certain that we have his body, his age, or his face. So sit with what it would mean if even the modest version is right. It would mean an entire royal bloodline carried something visible, something inherited, something so distinctive that they built a new art, a new religion, and a new city around it, then were destroyed for it. It would mean the most radical king in 3,000 years of Egyptian history, the man who tried to give the world a single god, 1,000 years before the religions we know, looked into a mirror and saw a face his own people would later try to scratch out of time. And if the bones truly do not match, if the body in that borrowed coffin is not the heretic at all, then Akhenaten's real remains are still missing, out there, unaccounted for. The most important skeleton in Egyptology lost. The priests thought they had erased him. They tore down his city. They chiseled away his name. They left him in a stranger's coffin with the gold of his face peeled off, in the dark, where no one would say his name and keep his soul alive. They almost won, but not quite, because the box of bones is still there, in its case in Cairo, with its catalog number and its missing face, still unidentified, still arguing with its own DNA, still refusing, after 3,000 years, to tell us exactly what it was. If this pulled you in, the next investigation goes even deeper into the body's history. Was not supposed to keep. Watch it on screen now.